And we are live. Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining me for another free indie filmmaking workshop. I'm Claire, the development manager at Liftoff, and in the chat room, I know we've got James, our co-founder, answering any questions you may have. Hello to Natalie, JDP Croy, nice to see you guys. Any questions you have at any point during this, just put them in the chat room there, and we will make sure to address them. So before we get started on the workshop, we have a very exciting announcement to make. Love doing these. So last week we had our first time filmmaker sessions, which was running exclusively on Vimeo on Demand. And now I can announce the winner, the special mentions, and the finalists. So the winner, they were all fantastic, but a huge congratulations to Rishi Martin's Sobriedad. So that's directed by Louis Bustamante Alvarado. A fantastic music video. So it was absolutely visually stunning, fantastic film. So congratulations. So that wins a live screening with us at Los Angeles Liftoff Film Festival and another live screening at Pinewood Studios later on in the year or next year, whenever we can sort of have guests back on the lot. So that would be really exciting. And then our two special mentions go to Dinosaur, directed by Maury Thompson, and Stable, directed by Mason Beck. Again, two fantastic films, and these three will be joining us for a director commentary roundtable here on our YouTube channel. These have been fantastic, hearing all about the films, delving more into the pre-production and post-production of those projects, and it's been great seeing the questions coming in and hearing more about those collaborations. So congratulations to all three of those films. And then here we go, in this ticker down here, are all our finalists. So those are A Love Story, A Summer to Remember, Caravan, Castigo Silencioso, apologies for terrible pronunciation here, Inner City Girls, Memorias de un Rob, Offset, Outer Space, I Don't Believe In, Stammer, The Fit, When Life Gives You Lemons, and When the Smoke Fumes. So those are all our fantastic finalists who receive free intermediate membership with Liftoff for 1 year. You'll be getting an email as soon as this live stream is done with all the details of how to sign up and all the benefits that come with that. So welcome to our network, and thank you again to everybody who screened with us and everybody who watched these true indie films from emerging filmmakers. We love seeing the support for it. Amazing. Well, I think that's our updates on the first time filmmaker sessions then. So on to today's workshop. So today's workshop is how to find perfect interviewees for your documentary film projects. This is in line with our Tokyo documentary special week, because currently we've had our headliner feature docs screening on Vimeo on Demand. About a month ago now, gosh, time flies at the moment in this bizarre time that we're going through, I did a workshop on documentary more in general, why I love it, why I think all narrative filmmakers should turn their hand to documentary filmmaking. And this time I'm going to be looking at a bit more of a specific element of it, how to find the perfect interviewees for your projects. So this might stop me waffling on about all the films I love. So here we go. The first place to start, what story do you want to tell? So documentary was founded in, well, the term was founded in 1922 with Robert Flaherty's film about Eskimos. But obviously storytelling has been around since the beginning of time. If you've read *Sapiens* by Yuval Noah Harari, you'll know the fantastic chapter that I'm talking about when he describes how the ability to tell stories is actually what allowed us to develop so much more as a species. Just incredible. And I guess documentaries are just a visual, cinematic way of telling stories. So first and foremost, exactly what story do you want to tell? As filmmakers, we love telling audiences amazing stories, so many of which are waiting to be told. There are stories within stories within stories. And as a documentarian, your first job is to decide exactly what narrative you want to tell. So I was talking to James about this, and we used the example of Coca-Cola. So imagine you want to make a film about Coca-Cola, but that's too broad. You've got to decide exactly what angle you're taking. You could talk about its development when it first began in the 1880s. You could look at product development and how it's become what it is today from when they first had cocaine in the product. You could look at the health implications, from a nutritional perspective. You could look at it from a globalization angle. What role did it play in the incredible marketing boom and globalization in that sense? My point is, you choose your angle first because that depends on who you want to tell this story. And that's so important. But equally, it's important to stay malleable. I spoke about this in my last workshop, how flexibility is so fundamental to filmmaking as a whole, but especially documentary. So your working hypothesis, as we call it, may change. It may change 10 times over the course of your production. So you may start at A and end at Z. But you will be ending with the best possible narrative. And what's interesting is that this will all be down to your interactions with your subjects. It will all be down to your interviewees. But it's important to always remember that every extraordinary story has extraordinary people at its centre. These people exist, and it is your job, if you are making a documentary, to find these people. They're everywhere. For so many years, I have loved Humans of New York. It's a photography project, it started as, but a photography blog, where a man started off doing a census of people in New York that he came across, taking their pictures and asking them very brief interviews. And the reason I love it is because it's just such a reminder that every single person you walk by is leading a complicated, fascinating life. So it's not hard to find people with a good story to tell, is the point. Over recent years, there has been a definite shift in what I'm going to call populist documentary, from issue-driven work towards much more character-driven films. So what I mean by this is, if you look at the archive of critically acclaimed feature documentaries, the likes of your Academy-nominated films, the films that premiered at big festivals, the majority of those are issue-driven or event-driven. But then if you contrast that with recent Netflix successes, the entire premise is now always on the contributors. The very hook of so many of these popular miniseries is the interviewees. And it would seem crazy to not mention the phenomenon Tiger King again in this case, because it was just a perfect example. The people that Eric Goode and Rebecca Chaiklin came across when they were doing this project is just staggering, isn't it? And what would it have been like if they hadn't have encountered all these people? Originally, the aim was to look at big cats in captivity, and they thought they were going to do that issue-driven piece, looking at all the sort of horrors of it, looking at the morals surrounding it, the ethics. But when they just came into contact with all these different web of fascinating people, it took over, and it absolutely made it, didn't it? And it's why you still see it everywhere on social media. Everyone is still talking about it. In terms of those event or issue-driven films though, so just to go back to those, I think it's still important to recognise that the most effective ones have always given a voice to the best narrative stakeholders. So this is a term that we coined, and I'm going to come back to this. But really what I mean is, within your chosen topic, your niche topic, it's your job to find the most authoritative voice on that matter, of course, that you can get on camera. So looking at these massive films then, Amy, Asif Kapadia's Academy-winning documentary. What was the aim of this film? Obviously, it was to examine family, media, addiction, fame. But I think the main goal of this was really her at the heart of it, uncovering her as a person, and then the genius that she was, that sort of troubled genius soul. And so, who were the best people to tell you that? Her closest friends, family, colleagues, throughout all the different time periods that the archive material looked at. It wouldn't have been the same if you just had crazy fanatic Amy fans, because that's telling a very different story. So my point is, they had a specific angle and they got the stakeholders to tell that story. Icarus, same thing, another Academy winner. By having Grigory Rodchenkov there, the director of Russia's National Anti-Doping Lab, it brought that film so much validity and it authenticated everything that they were saying, because he was undoubtedly the best person to be speaking about that subject matter. And now my favourite, Blackfish. Obviously all about examining orcas in captivity and the sort of theory that if you have these animals captive, it causes them unbelievable psychological damage and makes them more aggressive. So the film centres around Tilikum, the orca that ended up killing 3 humans over his time in captivity. And the people that the team interviewed were SeaWorld trainers, ex-SeaWorld trainers, of course, scientists, marine biologists. They had lawyers that were working for the different animal rights groups that were trying to change these captivity rules. All the best people to speak about it. And sorry, I get really nerdy and excited when I speak about this film, because Blackfish was one of those documentaries that really solidified my love for it. I couldn't believe how informative it was, but how powerful and emotive. And also, I mean, that power was evident when, after the release of this film, it had a massive impact on the visitors and the revenue on SeaWorld. And that film did that. I forget that this wasn't an issue that people were aware of before the film. Just incredible. See, that is proof that documentaries, films in general, can change the world. I love it. Right, I'm going to stop before I get too excited. So moving on, what I'm now going to look at is the 5 things to look for in a great contributor. So the 5 main characteristics, if you like, that I think you should be on the search for. And number 1, do they interest you as a human being? It's an important question, right? Because a lot of your time and effort is ultimately going to go into this person. You're going to be spending a lot of time with them, a lot of communication, a lot of that in person, hopefully. And you've got to ask yourself, are you willing to do that with this person? Now, originally, I had this slide titled as, do you like this human being? And I realised that that was the wrong question. That's the wrong semantics. Because the answer is you might not like them. You might despise them for everything they stand for. But that doesn't mean they're not the best person to be telling this narrative for you. So with that in mind, remember to keep your tolerance levels high. I think that's an important one. I mean, Michael Moore, he says that he only tries to interview people who he really disagrees with, because he thinks it creates that interesting dynamic and ultimately a better viewer experience. So yeah, we're not talking about do you like them, but do you think they're interesting? Number 2, do they have an external or internal, I read that the wrong way around, sorry, conflict? So important. Jesse Moss, the documentarian, he describes this as, are they engaged in some meaningful journey that intrigues me? Passion and obsession are infectious. I am drawn to characters engaged in both external and internal struggles, which leads to my final point. I am drawn to conflicted characters, wrestling with strong contradictions and impulses. And I don't think I could phrase that any better. Surely this is what we love about documentary. You're trying to get to a truth, you're trying to reveal a truth that ultimately we can recognise. We recognise it in ourselves, in the people around us, and we're recognising it on screen. And that confliction inside yourself, or those passions, whatever that may be, is what makes a good watch. Which leads me on to this point, because they're very similar, I think. Are they chasing a goal? As said in a number of screenwriting 101s, character is action and action is character. So I think what that means is if an interviewee, therefore, is chasing a certain goal, whatever that may be, whether it's a physical, tangible goal, or whether it's a more abstract idea, or if they are coming through something emotionally, the film crew, and thus the viewer, we join them on that journey. And it creates that narrative arc that, just like narrative works, documentary badly needs too. We do see it, unfortunately, in documentaries that sometimes get sent to us. They don't have that narrative drive and arc, so they're stagnant. I'm sure everybody has watched a film where they sort of think, well, it started off interesting and I thought the topic was kind of cool, but it didn't really go anywhere. So that's what you always want to avoid. And in summary, you can get that by having someone trying to achieve something. What's more, so I think this is even more important, this is the pinnacle really, following a goal uncovers human truths. So this is what I was kind of getting at before. Documenting somebody's journey, be that towards a goal or as they grapple with a conflict, gives us exposure to the aspirations, vulnerabilities, insecurities, and flaws of the real human inside. And I'm going to use this beautiful film as an example. So this was Sean McAllister, A Syrian Love Story, back in, I think, 2014. So the logline was, filmed over 5 years, A Syrian Love Story charts an incredible odyssey to political freedom. For Ragda and Amir, it is a journey of hope, dreams, and despair for the revolution, their homeland, and each other. So what was so interesting about this film was that it only materialised because of Ragda and Amir. So McAllister encountered them. He was actually shooting for a BBC documentary, The Reluctant Revolutionary, in Yemen. And this is a quote from him at the bottom there. He says, "It would have been a film about that year and the Arab Spring, but ironically the film is much better for audiences because it wasn't commissioned in the end." He says, "I was just driven to film Amir." So they were both political prisoners in Damascus, sort of speaking out against the oppressive regime at the time. And it landed them both in prison. That's where they actually met. And the film, which was filmed over a series of years, documents those different conflicts, the journey towards trying to be a family unit again with children, when they both spend time in prison at different times, and also the emotional journey of ultimately trying to decide, especially for Ragda, the mum there, what's more important, fighting for your political beliefs, or is it having a stable and ultimately, I guess, successful family unit? It's a stunning film. I highly recommend it. What fun fact, it's not fun, but Sean McAllister himself was actually arrested while he was filming this, and he was imprisoned and interrogated. This was in Damascus, and actually lost quite a lot of footage, but then just rebuilt it all. Just what an unbelievable project to be a part of. Number 4 then. Is this person a good storyteller? Gotta be crucial, obviously. Do they have that je ne sais quoi charisma? And the example I'm going to use for this is another film that I mentioned in my previous workshop, because I just think it's perfect for this. Short documentary, Black Sheep, directed by Ed Perkins. This is a film that centres around a real Cornelius who met Ed Perkins and was sort of telling him about his life And Ed Perkins said he spoke so candidly and so charismatically that I was just drawn to this story, and I thought, I have to try and tell this story. And so a lot of the film is just Cornelius himself there, who you see in the picture, speaking so rawly, with so much vulnerability, but so much charisma, just telling his battles about life growing up as a black teenager in London. Wonderful, wonderful film. And like I said, it did actually end up getting Academy nominated in 2018. But the point is, he was just a perfect person. He had that je ne sais quoi. Jesse Moss then, so to go back to Jesse, describes this as finding subjects who are natural performers helps, but the real interest is locating the deeper motivations and measuring the distance between the public and private self. Of course, screen presence or charisma is essential, but this is hard to define or quantify. You tend to recognise these qualities when you find them, or perhaps you have no business making documentaries. Love the sass at the end there, but I think it's true. So using one of Jesse's own films as another example, The Overnighters, which won the... So it screened at Sundance, it premiered at Sundance, and I think it won the Special Jury Award. But it's a beautiful film. It's set in North Dakota, and it kind of depicts a series of men who are chasing the American dream, so to speak, after the North Dakota oil boom. But they find that when they get there, it's impossible to find affordable housing. It's not everything they built it up to be. They all have amazing stories and they're all very interesting, but the film centres around a local pastor called Jay Rank, who incredibly let over 1,000 people, I think it was, over a series of 2 years, live in the church. And it's just interesting because Jesse Moss himself, when he started doing the research and went out to North Dakota, he sort of said, I never thought this is what the story would be. Who did I think would be interested in a Lutheran pastor and a church? But it was him. It was Jay who just captivated me immediately. And I think the pastor said to himself, he even said to Jesse at one point, I could lose my job, but I'm doing this because it's so important. Highly recommend this film. Definitely go and check it out if you haven't seen it. And number 5 then. This is a big one. Are they robust in their opinions and ego? What I mean by this is, do they have strength and conviction in what they're saying and what they believe? It would be useless to watch a documentary on a topic where you're interviewing them and you go, well, yeah, I understand that, but did you not consider this? Don't you think this? And they just sat there and went, yeah, you could be right, actually. That doesn't make a good documentary. That doesn't make good viewing. So you need people who are strong in their convictions. And as I've said here, clearly this is especially important when you're dealing with more controversial subject matters. Passivity and submission simply won't carry a film. And a good example of this, I think, is another film set in North Dakota. There we go. Jesus Camp. So this was actually nominated for an Academy Award. And it was Heidi Ewing and Rachel Grady's radical and eye-opening documentary, which explored evangelical Christian community in America's Bible Belt, so a children's summer camp. And it shows dual-sided interviews, along with archive material and investigative shots, that exposes the audience to a culture of extremely devoted people, whilst touching on a number of sensitive topics. You know, it looks at marriage equality, global warming, abortion rights. It looks at a lot of sensitive issues, and I just use it as this example here. Because if you're talking about something really controversial, the people that you're talking to have to be robust. A quirky word of warning here. So this is kind of going to go against what I've just said, but I thought it was worth sharing with you. This is by Robert Greene. He says, too often, documentary filmmakers fetishize unusualness in their subjects. because that's what the marketplace seems to demand. But to my mind, too often one subject's quirk can be too easily swapped with another's. The films end up feeling like repeats of the same thing. Quirk may sell, but it can also bore. And I just think it's worth bearing this in mind, because I do think he has a point. I disagree overall, because I think recent successes have kind of shown this to not be true at the moment. But I do think the line there to focus on is that one subject's quirk can be too easily swapped with another's. It has to be authentic. It has to be whole in that person. Just to use like a personal example, when I was working on television casting, for instance, I'll never forget one of the associate producers saying to me that when you're conducting your initial phone interviews, a sentence that she hated was, "Why do you think you would be good for filming?" And the answer was, "Oh, because I'm mad, me." And I thought it was funny. She was just saying, you know, we want something more interesting than just mad or quirky for quirky's sake. So I just thought that was worth sharing. But moving on then, if we've got those are the characteristics, the things we're looking for, how do you go about finding these gems? And we're obviously talking about cases where a very specific event or an organisation won't lead you to the people. So obviously if you're filming something like White Helmets, then that organisation are going to provide you with all the interviewees you need. But if that's not the case, social media is your best friend. You've got to learn to love it, hey? If you can't beat them, join them. But it really is fantastic, because there are so many places you can begin. Here are just a few of them, but I think the obvious ones to think of originally are Facebook groups, especially if you're looking at a certain event or a certain hobby, interest. Instagram accounts for the same reason, Instagram TV. To be a bit more specific and start narrowing it down, you can move that search to hashtags. So look for different hashtags that people are following. Look at Twitter hashtags as well. Don't forget Twitter. Viral posts on a subject matter and sift through the comments. So I think there are so often interesting conversations that start when you see these viral posts. But also, I mean, obviously a place to start would be the person who posted it themselves. Similarly, blogs, petitions, people who have started petitions or are fighting or sharing them, or put out a casting call. A bit more traditional, just throw it out there and see what you've got. Which in some ways is, of course, a press release, but you could do it in the true old-fashioned sense of the word. I promise you it's not as scary as it sounds. I had never written a press release before working at Liftoff, and we use them all the time to promote our festivals and our events. So what you're looking for, I guess, with looking for interviewees with a documentary is you want to go local. So you want those local news outlets because you want to be able to find those people. Online publications as well, though, because of course they get a wider reach. And outline the basic premise of your project and of course who you're looking for. You don't want to be vague. I mean, some cases will demand that. Of course, all of this is so dependent on what you're doing, but ultimately you don't want to waste anybody's time. You don't want to waste their time, you don't want to waste your time. So try and be as specific as possible. Are you looking for men? Are you looking for a certain age group? Are you looking for people with a certain interest? Are you looking for people who do a certain activity every week? What are you looking for? And make sure that you have a website. Very, very important. Because A, you need to legitimize what you're doing. If you're asking people to put trust in what you're doing and open themselves up, you need to legitimize yourself. And B, it's also so that you have accessible contact information or maybe even an application page that you're directing people to on that website. And I just thought it was worth a little mention here, street casting. It can be very successful, for finding diversity and authenticity. Fashion Scouts, as I've said there, have been doing it since their beginnings, and it's very popular as well for casting TV shows. But I think it could also work for documentary filmmaking. It really depends, of course, but quite simply, you're wanting to turn up at the type of place that a certain person or demographic that you're looking for would visit. So maybe that's in a certain city, but really to make your life even easier, you should be thinking even more specific than that. Are the kinds of people that you're looking for the type of people that would go to the gym every day? Because you might then want to go there. Would they be the people who are volunteering at a community centre? The possibilities are obviously endless, but it's all about just being specific. So now we're assuming we have got these fantastic people, they've passed all the tests so far, and it's so important. Screen test, screen test, screen test. Ramona Diaz says that a casting director once told me that she knew when a certain person was right for the role because she couldn't see beyond them when they read their lines. They took up the entire space in front of her. So the characters I'm thinking of building a documentary film around should do the same. They should invade the frame in a tight shot, a wide shot, and everything in between. And I think that's a really nice way of thinking of it. Think of it from that narrative perspective. Put that narrative filmmaker hat on and ask yourself, can I take my eyes off this person? Research conversations. So in line with screen testing, these are the things you want to bear in mind when you're not at the actual production yet. Remember that it is primarily a listening exercise. Don't be chatting away too much. You really want to be taking on the listener role, listening for interesting sound bites or topics that you then want to build on at a later date with that person. I think this is important. Speak in generalizations. So avoid discussing at length the really meaty areas that you want to capture raw, because you don't want these to sound rehearsed and stale when it then comes to the actual shooting interviews. Build trust. Everything we always speak about, the trust between you is so crucial in getting that person to feel they're at a point where they can be vulnerable in front of you, where they feel they can say exactly what they're feeling. And that's what's going to get you your gems. And in line with that, address any queries or concerns. Keep reminding them that they can ask you anything. You will be completely transparent. You will sort out anything that they're not quite sure on. So again, very important. And of course, don't miss an opportunity. Discuss and ask for any suitable archive material. Keep a little notebook, and if when you're speaking about those generalizations or the sound bites that you're listening for, if something pops up and you think, oh, I wonder if they've got that on like old video, family footage or something, make a note and make sure you ask for it, because archive material can be so powerful, as we know. Ultimately then, careful selection and building a rapport and trust with your interviewees is a million times more important than any conducting and shooting interview tips you can read on Google. You can type that into Google and you will get a ton of information. Film schools teach it, but I think they're missing what the fundamental building blocks are, which are, just to briefly go over them, yes, you should always aim to shoot interviews in either significant places to the topic or a situation where the interviewee feels really comfortable. Maybe that's their home, maybe it's that community centre, but wherever it is that they are most relaxed. And yes, you need to ensure your questions can't be misinterpreted. Read them again and again. Maybe ask somebody else, ask another crew member the questions, and just make sure, could this be taken a different way, or am I definitely going to get the response that I'm after? Yes, you must always maintain eye contact and give facial reactions to reassure your interviewee. Remember that these aren't actors. These are normal human beings. Some people will find those cameras rolling really intimidating and off-putting. So have them look at you directly, nod along, feel like a nodding dog, and give them those reactions to keep them talking to you. And yes, you must establish your right to interrupt and redirect the interview. That's really important. Maybe it's as simple as saying, "Hi Tom, just to let you know, if at any point I feel like we're veering off, I might just jump in there and say, could we go back over that, or could we rephrase that?" Establish that early on so that it doesn't throw them. Really important. But nothing is more important than ensuring you have the best possible people, those narrative stakeholders that we've been talking about, to voice this story that you want to share with the world. Make sure that you are always serving your story and doing it justice. Because as I said earlier, films can change the world, documentaries can change the world. So make sure you have the right people telling that story. Okay, that concludes the sort of workshop today, but a few things to mention. Are you a filmmaker looking to launch your career? If so, we have got our professional membership. This is $189 for a year, which includes free submissions. We've got 26 different festivals and showcases. We've got career road mapping sessions, which we now do live on this YouTube. Join us in that audience when we get back up and running in Pinewood. We've got a jobs dashboard with all sorts of different top jobs in the industry going. And we do market film representation. So we go to Cannes, TIFF, AFM, EFM, and we represent your projects for you. So that's liftoff.network/membership. And we have production launch workshops. So just sign up to watch our free introductory courses, amazing modules run by Ben Pullman, the other co-founder here at Liftoff, on all things right the way from conception to completion of a project. Fan. So I'm just gonna glance over here and see if we've got any comments in the chat room there. Any more questions, just shoot them towards James and he'll answer. Hi, Kyriakos. Nice to see you there. So yeah, I'll give you a second and we can see if you've got any other ideas. But in the meantime, just another quick look at what is happening this week and the next few weeks at Liftoff. So we've got 2 weeks remaining of our Tokyo Liftoff Film Festival. We have got 4 more pages of brilliant programs to bring you. And live from Sunday as well, we have got our June edition of the Liftoff sessions. So that goes live Sunday at 10 p.m. BST and will be running for a week. So we have never made it easier for you to engage with an abundance of true indie film. So do go and check it out. The links will all be in the description here. So I think then, if we haven't got any comments coming through, I think that's everything. So thank you so much for listening to this workshop today, and have a good weekend.